You're listening to the Pigskin Cafe, a podcast covering the wild world of college football. On tap for today are hot takes, controversy, and analysis on your favorite team. Here's your host, Hampton Sipper, in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Pigskin Cafe. Fellas, it's been a second. Grateful to see you. I was thinking, as we get this kicked off, there's been 2 marriages since the last time we recorded a podcast. Graham, have you thought about it like that?
No, I have not.
Well, I just had a realization about 30 seconds ago, figure it was worth mentioning. Graham and I both have been married since the last time we recorded a podcast. And Hampton, share the big news with everybody.
I'm still single, everyone.
Hey, we got an exciting show. We get a lot of joy out of doing this. Thanks for taking time out of your day to listen to this. But y'all are somewhat here for us, but more here for what we talk about. So, hey, we're going to do kind of an SEC preview. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to throw at you guys. And I think that it would be worth and it'd be valuable to just have a little bit of discord back and forth of why you think that team is that team or that player is answering the question. Just give us some context of how you got there. So, hey, let's jump right in. SEC West, as people have said, the hardest division in college football. Who is the sleeper team in the West? Doesn't mean they have to win, but who do you feel like is the sleeper team that the Alabamas, the LSUs have to watch out for?
Graham, you want to take this one first?
That was the only thing I forgot to do.
Hey, we're a little rusty. We extended a little grace. It's been a while. You're good.
Here we go.
We're not in midseason form just yet. My sleeper team in the West, I feel like with the conferences expanding and divisions going away next year, I feel like we really got to hit home this year, and it's got to be very, very important because last year divisions. So
right.
I'm going to go with the Ole Miss Rebels. I think when you look at the sleeper in the West, Alabama, not a sleeper. LSU was the sleeper last year, but now they have a vengeance coming for them because they put their name on the map. Brian Kelly showed up and showed out his first year. A&M, I mean, I just don't know if A&M has a bigger target on their back like this year than they did last year, because they just keep angering other fan bases and not producing results. So Jimbo's in year 5 out in College Station, and so I can't really think that they're going to come out of nowhere. I mean, when it comes down to it, we loved Arkansas last year. Did they really get better this offseason? I'm not buying it. Mississippi State, losing Mike Leach, losing some big-time transfer players out. That hurts. Love Will Rogers at quarterback, but I mean, Ole Miss just has the pieces to be successful with Lane Kiffin, Jackson Dart. I'm not going to hint on my breakout player from the West, but they're also coming from Ole Miss. But I think you've got a team that right now is being undervalued. I mean, they let me see that their over/under is 7.5 wins.
Ooh, wow.
I think that. I feel like that's a little bit low with Ole Miss that we've seen these past few years. Lane Kiffin's going to score. They've got Quinshon Judkins, a running back who really took the league by storm last year. So I mean, you got at least a good chunk of games where you think they're easily winnable. I mean, if this team gets hot, I mean it's anybody's game. So Hampton, I probably just stole that one from you. So feel free to tell me how correct I am, or you can talk about another team in the West.
Well, I just had a feeling that we were going to pick the same team because last year our team was Mississippi State, both of us, and we ended up being actually very correct on that. Mississippi State had a good year, very, very solid team. I believe they went 8-4, and finished the season 9-4 with a bowl win. After the tragic passing of one Mike Leach, but they're not my pick this year for Graham. Many of the reasons you stated. I'm a big Will Rogers guy. I think he's a really solid quarterback. Probably doesn't have an NFL future, but very good college quarterback, especially in that system. But like you said, transfer loss, Ra Thomas going to Georgia, a few other key losses at the receiver position. I think they lost a good bit on defense as well. Emmanuel Forbes, their star DB, went to the NFL. So I don't think they're going to be what they were last year. You go to Arkansas, like you mentioned, they really, really disappointed last year. I mean, a lot of that had to do with KJ Jefferson being hurt, but I think they've kind of rehauled that coaching staff because I think there were some internal issues there. And I like KJ Jefferson, I like Rocket Sanders, and I like a couple of guys they got on defense, but they lost their best player and Drew Sanders, and then Jalen Catalon went to Texas, so they're not going to be my pick. And then Auburn, while I think they'll be improved from last year, which isn't saying much. I know that is not my Alabama hate coming out. That's just being factual. They were 5-7 last year, not a very good football team. I think they will be improved under Hugh Freeze. They named Peyton Thorne the starting quarterback. They're going to be implementing his offensive system. They have an overhaul, an influx of transfers that are going to really make or break that roster. And I think they feel good about those guys, but I don't think they're quite ready to make that leap. That might be year 2 or 3 for Hugh Freeze with the way he's recruiting right now down in the Plains. Texas A&M, I don't think they're really a sleeper team, but we will talk about them shortly because I think they're a very fascinating team to discuss. But Ole Miss, Graham, I'm with you. Jackson Dart was a solid quarterback last year, especially with his running ability. His passing could be very spotty at times, and I know with the loss of Jonathan Mingo and I believe the receiver's last name Heath, they were their 2 primary targets. Lost them, but they got Chris Marshall from Texas A&M, who's a really effective player. They feel really good about their offensive line. I think they feel like they had the most depth there that they've had since Kiffin's been in Oxford. And you got Quinshon Judkins, the best back in the SEC, probably top 5 back in the country. I mean, you talk about a breakout player. That guy was an absolute stallion last year. I mean, very impressive with him and Zach Evans, the transfer that came in from TCU. They were a great 1-2 punch, but I think Judkins is going to take it to another level this year. And the question with them is going to be their defense because Pete Golding comes from Alabama. We all love old Pete, but I do think they're going to be improved on that side of the ball. And so you marry an improved defense with an offense with possibly a second-year starter in that system, another year at Judkins, an improved offensive line. I think you've got a really, really dangerous team. And it's going to be very interesting because I don't believe they named a starter because there's still competition between Sanders and Dart. But I feel like they're good either way at that position. So I'm very high on Ole Miss going in to 2023. I know that differs from a lot of magazine coverage from preview season, but I think the Rebels are going to sneak up and pull a couple upsets this year. All right, Luke Robinson. You're muted. Hey, Chase.
Unmute yourself.
Dang, I was just saying that I was thinking about Duncan's over here eating out of the bowl, so I was like, I bet no one wants to hear him just munching out. I was actually just thinking about Luke. Y'all were talking about Luke like I know this guy if I on a first name basis. Luke Robinson. He was talking about if you were in the same room as Mississippi State's head coach, would you even know who he was? And I don't think I would.
You probably wouldn't. He's an average Joe.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one question before we get out of this division. If you had to pick a team that has the best record at the end of the year, and you had to choose between Arkansas, A&M, and Auburn, which team are you taking?
I'll take this one first, Graham.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to go with A&M. I know, to me, that was, I think, a question we were going to talk, but we can kind of infuse it here. That is the most compelling storyline in the entire SEC this year. what is the marriage between Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino going to look like going into 2023? The talent is there. Connor Weigman at quarterback. He's still battling, but I'm pretty sure he's going to get the job. Their receiving core, Malik Muhammad, Evan Stewart, great trio on the outside. I know they got another guy, and I can't remember his name, but they've got he's there, and he's going to make an impact. Their offensive line was really an issue for them last year. They expect improvement there. But really on the offensive side of the ball, it's going to hinge on if Jimbo Fisher is going to stop being stubborn and come from 2013 into the 2023 offensive world of college football. Because if they do, if they adopt some spread-like RPO-type principles into this offense, they're going to be a very talented team because defensively, you've got guys like McKinley Jackson, Walter Nolan on the defensive line that are going to be anchors there. You got Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, who are going to be great pass rushers. And you've got who else you got? Tony Grimes, the corner transfer from North Carolina, who's going to be a really good player. He was a standout at North Carolina, going to bolster that pass defense. They'll also a few people in the back end, but one thing that you may not realize, even though A&M went 5-7 last year, they were number one in the SEC in pass defense. So if they can get that run defense up to snuff, because they were dreadful at stopping the run, if they can increase that, DJ Durkin and that side of the ball, and the offense takes the leap with Connor Weigman, you got the talent outside, they can be a very, very good team. Now, do I see a national championship on the horizon this year? Absolutely not. But I think that they can finish top 2 or 3 in this division for sure.
Yeah, I like it. Graham, who do you got out of those 3 teams?
Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of on the same boat with Hampton that it should be Texas A&M, and from the analytical standpoint, it should be. But from the vibe check,
the vibe check, yes, please check it.
But from the vibe check, I would say Auburn. I think that when you look at it, who's going to be excited game 1 to game 12 this year? A&M, Arkansas, they've done better than everybody's expected, so I think they're kind of in the, we're doing okay boat. Auburn has been so discontent with everything around their program for years. Since they won the national championship, they've just been discontent. Gus Malzahn came in, they were excited, then deflated. Then they fired Gus Malzahn. Harsin comes in. There was really no ever inflation of their program and of the fan base. But with Hugh Freeze coming in, that fan base is excited. So from the vibe check, has no analytical standpoint and probably will not live the test of time. I would say Auburn because I feel like we're talking about who gets to 9 wins instead of we're not talking about who gets 11. We're talking about who gets to 9, and I think Auburn's projected at 7, and it's projected 8.5. So they're really close in there. Arkansas, they make a bowl game, but I don't think they're taking a big step forward. So I'll take Auburn.
I like that. I see where A&M plays Auburn at home, then Ole Miss plays at Auburn. So those are 2 games to kind of circle. I think that A&M probably has that one, but man, I think that if you're an Ole Miss Rebel, you better come ready to play. So let's switch over to the other side of the division. There's so many. It's crazy how good the SEC is. Thinking that they're going to add 2 more teams, and it's just going to become even more fun. But you're right, Graham. We have to kind of take a hold of this because divisions aren't going to be a thing for much longer. So as we move east, Hampton, who is the sleeper team in the East Division of the SEC?
Well, when we did this pod about 2 years ago, and we asked a similar question going into 2021, I said Kentucky. And Kentucky is going to be my sleeper team again going into 2023. I feel really, really good, and they feel really, really good. Well, most importantly, about the addition of Devin Leary from North Carolina State. I think that is going to be huge for them. I think they feel really a lot better about their offensive line, which was a nightmare last year for them compared to what they had in the past. And I think you can attribute some of that to them losing their offensive line coach, Eric Wolford, to Alabama.
Yeah.
You've got Dane Key on the outside, Barry Brown, who was a freshman that flashed a lot last year. I think he is going to take another leap. You've got the return of Liam Cohen, who kind of led that 2021 offense, called plays for them. He comes back to Lexington, and if they can get that offense not even all the way back to 2021 levels, but from 2021 to last year, they went from 32 points per game to 20. If you can get even to 28 to 30, which I don't think they're going to have any problem doing that, then they're going to be a very dangerous team in the East because their defense is going to be good. They've got a freshman, or he's now a sophomore, defensive tackle who's going to kind of anchor that front and be a huge contributor for them. And I think that they're built to maybe not win the East. I'm not going to predict that. I still think, not to spoil later, but I still think it's Georgia's division. But I think they can finish second or third easily because for me, I'm not as high on Tennessee as some in the media are. And I mean, I would love to talk about Tennessee at some point because I think they're a very interesting team. But for me, Kentucky is kind of the sleeper of this division, and I could easily see them having a 9 to 10 win year.
I think that's good. If I were to recall correctly, it felt like for Kentucky, there was a little bit of suffering from success, and then just the perfect storm of transition. They had really good coaches that left for really good reasons, and you try your best to plug the holes, and it happens. And I think last year, not that it's an outlier that you can't trust it, but it did feel like the perfect storm of transition. So I think it's a good sleeper team. I think that it's really, I could see them getting it back on track pretty easily. Hey, we can remember what the standard was. Let's get back to it. Graham, as you think about the East of the SEC, who is the sleeper team that you're watching and that other teams need to be watching for?
MIZOU is what you're supposed to say back. Mizzou.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going with Mizzou. I'm really trying to pull one out of the hat here. This Missouri team is not going to repeat what Tennessee did and just come out of nowhere. They're not going to do that. But when you look at returning production, they're bringing back almost 80% of their offense, and they're returning production. So I mean, you got Brady Cook back. You did lose their wide receiver Lovett to Georgia. And he's a big loss. But they're bringing back 4 of their 5 offensive linemen. They're bringing back most of their defense. I think when you look at it, and who's going to be the team that is really the sleeper, the surprise of the league, it comes down to who do you play at home. It doesn't matter who you play on the road, who you play at home. Missouri plays South Carolina at home. They play LSU at home. They play Tennessee at home, and they play Florida at home. They go on the road for Kentucky, which I think is probably a winnable game. They go on the road against Georgia, not a winnable game. And they go on the road against Arkansas, could be a winnable game. So when you look at it, I think it's a team that's very much getting slept on. And I think Missouri's state government has something going right that if you commit to a school in the state, they can go ahead and start giving you NIL money in high school. So I think Missouri, the whole state is buying into to what Mizzou is building in football, and Eli Drinkwitz is doing going into year 3. I mean, I think over the years they've had they always play that one team that they're always supposed to lose to at home. Super close. Was it Georgia last year? I mean, they were supposed to
beat them.
Georgia's supposed to run through them, and what is it? It comes down to the fourth quarter with a few minutes left in the game. I think Mizzou just has they just have that dog in them. That's they always can take down those big teams, and they get so close. So I think this year's the year that maybe they're going to pull a couple of those games off. They play the teams they play at home. Maybe so. Give me Mizzou.
I like it.
So can I add something to that?
Yeah,
sure.
please.
I don't hate the pick. It just shocked me because I could have swore you were going to go with South Carolina because they're a very sleepery team with Radler, who's apparently blowing the roof off of Columbia, and they've got a lot of talent. Their offensive line might be a mess, and their running game and their defense really needs to improve. But with Mizzou, just quick note I wanted to add: year 4 for Drinkwitz,
Year 4,
kind of a make or break year.
Yep.
You've been hovering around 500. He needs to get at least 8 wins this year. I know he's got a couple recruits in this upcoming class that he's going to be able to land that are 5 stars that they're pumped about, but you got to show it on the field, man. This year 4, your guys are in the program. Time to see what you're made of.
That's right, and you heard us if you're listening. Hey, there's recruits on the way, and this again, I don't think that anybody's asking for them to win a national championship or to win the division per se, but I think a step up because there's help on the way. And what Graham was referring to, we're using a new platform. I was going to try to share my screen because this is pretty fascinating and just showing you the landscape of college football that's even seeping into high school football, where it says that if they pick an in-state school, then they can receive NIL money, which that is a game changer. And when you're 18 and people are able to offer you money, and that's all good, I think Missouri themselves have said, hey, how can we keep some of the talent that we already have? And I'd love to see Alabama. I'd love to see all these. I don't think I like the rule, but if everyone else is playing by it, then it's either going to hurt you or you've got to play, just the same. So I don't know if the rule is good for college football, but Missouri's playing how they want it to. So you're right, Graham. This could be a very pivotal year for them to really take the next step, have help on the way, and who knows, they could really turn into something in the next 3 years. So I love that pick. Hampton, you're probably right. I think that the easy choice would have been South Carolina, and we'll have probably space, at least in the coming weeks for sure, to give them plenty of space because they're an exciting team, seems to have a great coach. And
big matchup week 1 too.
Yeah, who do they play? Remind me.
Play North Carolina.
Here we go.
First
week. Yeah, they got those fun regional matchups of them and I guess that this year, and then also Clemson coming up. So. Guys, let's keep the ball rolling. So one of the things I think I was the most impressed with last year was when we asked this question, and then if you watch just a regular SEC, if you were to watch the CBS game, that's not always Alabama, it's not always Georgia, sometimes you just get a good matchup. There were guys that you said to this question that I heard their name was like, wow, y'all have done your research, super impressed. That's why people listen to the show. So the question is, who are some breakout players on each side of the ball? So I have to ask a clarification question. Do we want to do East-West, defense, offense? So you have 4 players in total, or you just want to do defense, offense?
I think we can do defense, offense since we're kind of talking about both in the same show. Let's do defense or just one apiece.
Awesome. I remember one of you guys talked about Bumper Pool. And if you ever watched an Arkansas game, the guy was all over the field making every tackle. So great pick last year. Excited to see what you have going on this year, who you've picked. So who on the defensive side of the ball do you think is going to be a breakout player? Graham, let's start with you.
So a breakout player, that's tough. I think in the West on defense, I'm going to be interested in Harold Perkins again at LSU.
Graham?
Just a guy that he showed that he had that elite potential last year in so many games. But then there were some games that, not that I didn't feel like I heard of them, but I didn't really feel like it was the make or break. Like SEC championship game, LSU, Georgia, was I hearing Harold Perkins called a lot? Not really. Whenever it was Alabama, LSU, was I hearing Harold Perkins called a lot? Every other play.
Yep.
And so I think, is he a breakout guy in a way of like, oh, you've never heard of Harold Perkins Jr.? You've heard of him, but I think this could be his step to break the LSU curse of a great freshman year and then a quiet sophomore year. For example, a Keyshawn Butte, really had a standout freshman year at LSU and then was not able to replicate it sophomore or junior year. So will Harold Perkins develop year 2 under Brian Kelly? That's the kind of a defensive guy that I'm looking at. And I'm sorry if I stole your guy, Hampton, but that was the name that was on my tongue.
Yeah, well, it was on mine too until you stole it from me. But I'll give you another one. I think this guy, if you follow recruiting, you know who he is. But I think the whole college football world is going to know the name Caleb Downs. I think defensively, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bama guy. I am so high on this kid. Not only is he great in pass coverage, he brings the thump in the run game. He'll come down and tackle and come down with bad intentions. And from the moment he stepped on campus, I mean, practice 2 or 3 of spring, he got that starting safety spot. He has not relinquished it. And we are a week and a half, we're 10 days away from Alabama versus Middle Tennessee State. So I think Caleb Downs is going to make a huge impact on the Alabama defense. I think he's going to be an improvement, actually, from personnel in the past. Jordan Battle, DeMarco Hellams, good, solid players, but they did not have the athletic upside that Caleb Downs does. And I think he's going to be a Swiss Army knife and a tool that Mr. Kevin Steele can utilize throughout the year. And I think he is going to be a freshman All-American, and you will know the name by the end of the year.
Know the name, remember the name. Hey, I will say, you teed that up well. If you keep up with recruiting, you know this guy's name because he hasn't played a snap yet, and there are people that are excited about him. And I will say that there's been 2 players that I think just scrolling through some of the top talent when they're in high school, him and Jalen Waddle have film that you can watch from their high school season that when you cut it on, you don't need the little icon to tell you which player is them because they're the best player by far. And it looks like they're playing with little kids. I mean, he's that talented, SEC ready. I love that you mentioned him. So fellas, let's move to the offensive side of the ball. And I think that there's a lot of transition, to use that word again, but a lot of teams trying to find their guy, a lot of question marks. And we've, if anything, maybe seen Georgia's playbook, their DNA of wanting to run the ball first and establish the run kind of come back in style. So this doesn't per se have to be a quarterback, while in the years past it might have had to been. So with that being said, Graham, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you again. Who's your offensive player in the SEC that is going to break out?
Don't take this one from me.
I hinted at it earlier. And if Hampton just has the same idea that I do, then just so be it. I'm going with Michael Trigg from Ole Miss.
Good pick.
So a guy that was a highly rated recruit, went to USC. It didn't work out. Transfers to Ole Miss last year. Don't really hear his name very much. There was a lot of hype for him coming into camp, but he didn't really produce much. I think that.
Did he get hurt last year?
Maybe. I mean, he's more of a breakout kind of guy. He broke it last year.
Go ahead.
And anyway, I'm going with Michael Trigg. I think that when you look at it, Jackson Dart's going to have a good run game. Quinshad Judkins, he's going to throw somebody. With Mingo going to the NFL, somebody is going to have to help him out. So I'm going with Michael Trigg. I feel like there's maybe a little bit of camaraderie there. It's another year in the Lane Kiffin system, and maybe this is the year of the tight end in Oxford.
I like it. Hampton, who's your offensive player that we need to watch for because they're going to break out this year?
Well, I just have to say that was so funny to me that the way Graham responded to that. He's like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But I didn't mean to cut you off. I think I want to say he started out the year, was doing all right, and then he got hurt and kind of hampered his development. I was just honestly adding to your point because I thought it was a great pick for sure. But, talking about how Ole Miss can utilize the tight end, I remember in 2020 they did that a lot, especially against Alabama, throwing the ball to the tight end up the seam out of those wide splits that Tennessee likes to use. So I definitely think Michael Trigg can be a weapon. I almost picked another tight end at Alabama named Mari Nyblack that I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit, who I think is going to have a big year. But my pick is going to be another freshman. Similar to Caleb Downs, you follow recruiting, you know the name, but Nicholas Harbor from South Carolina. He is an athlete from the Washington metro area. He is an incredibly smart kid, runs like a 10-meter track, 10-meter or 10-second 100-meter, and they've converted him to a receiver. He's 6'5", like 220, 230. He is a specimen, an absolute specimen. He's kind of banged up right now, but Shane Beamer said yesterday that he believes that he will be ready for that first game. And I think with Rattler, the reports of him and how well he's playing, along with Juice Wells, who is another receiver that South Carolina has, that Rattler has good connection with, and that they're expecting the big year from, I think Harvard's going to be able to complement him well and really be a powerful weapon for them. So I'm looking forward to watching him this fall.
I like it. It's that I knew that name, but I did not know that he was 6'5" and that fast. That is unreal. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Had a thought, maybe not worth throwing in here, but I just had a thought of, somebody like Rattler, if he's playing basketball and he plays college basketball, he's going off to the NBA and he never gets the development that he needs, or, kind of just able to kind of develop as a player. And I'm not saying the guy even gets drafted, but I'm glad that he has had the ability to a little bit rewrite his career, and that football kind of says, hey, we don't need you to become an NFL or NBA player overnight. And somebody like him who had a great freshman year and then just great might even be an exaggeration, but I'm glad somebody like him, he's gotten the chance to develop. We'll get to see the best Spencer Rattler whenever it's his time to go to the NFL draft. So just kind of had that thought, and I think that's why we love college football so much. So fellas, I've got one more question, and I'm glad that we teed it up this way. And the question is, all right, we've talked about the division. We've talked about sleeper teams to watch out for, players to watch out for. And now the question that I think we're all asking is, who wins the division? Who's going to be in Atlanta when it comes to the SEC championship game, and has been coined to be the actual national championship, several times, of just how good the quality of the matchup is. So who's your team? Hampton, I'm going to start with you. Let's start in the East. Who's your team in the East? Yes.
Well, I would love to pick somebody else in this spot, but I think it's kind of hard to, just because I do think, while I think there's a possibility that the East can be tougher than they have been in previous years. I know Tennessee was a good number 2 last year, and really this year is going to be the question of, they're going to have to answer the question, was that a one-season fluke? Or are we a program now? Are we going to build upon what we did last year? And I've got questions about that. I don't think they're going to be nearly as prolific offensively, because I don't think Joe Milton is as good as Hendon Hooker. I think Hendon Hooker operated that offense at a very high level. Joe Milton can throw the ball a country mile. He can, but he's also very erratic with his accuracy. And this is year 5 or 6 for him. I've lost count at this point. He's on the Stetson Bennett AARP plan. And I'm worried about the efficiency that offense will be run with, because he's also not the best runner. Like, Hendon Hooker was actually a really good runner as well. And when you take the dual threat aspect away, and if he's not going to be pinpoint accurate on everything, I think that offense, while being good, is not going to be the level it was last year. And defensively, I still don't think they're there. I think they'll be improved from last year, because they were horrid against the pass. They ranked in the bottom tier of the whole of college football last year when it came to pass defense. Kentucky, like I said, sleeper team. South Carolina, not quite there, especially defensively with the run game. And then Florida, who we hadn't really touched on, I think they can be a solid team with Graham Mertz at quarterback. I like Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne, that 1-2 punch in the trenches. Or not in the trenches, in the backfield. They're going to be able to run the ball, I think, effectively. But weapons on the outside are lacking. They lost a lot on defense with Brenton Cox, Ventrell Miller, Dean, and a couple other players. So I don't think they're going to be able to compete. To me, Georgia is a cut above everybody else. Even with the new starting quarterback, Carson Beck, they have Brock Bowers coming back. They have Ladd McConkey at receiver, Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, and Arian Smith, who made a big play against Ohio State in that semifinal game. Offensive line will be good. And then their defense, while they lost a good bit of contributors, they lost a guy like Jalen Carter, who was a beast for them. They lost Keely Ringo. They've still got talent. I mean, they've recruited well. The cupboard is not bare. I'm a big fan of Malachi Starks. The safety that they have, it was a sophomore. He's a really good player for them. I am interested in their running back room because I think that is a big question mark, especially with Branson Robinson being out for the year now with a ruptured patella. So that's going to be interesting how they navigate that because I believe Kendall Milton and Edwards are a little banged up right now from what I saw, or they were at least sometime during fall camp. But needless to say, I think they are clearly the favorite in the East, but the West is going to be very fascinating to talk about, and I can't wait to kind of dive into that with you guys. So, Graham, what do you think, man? Who do you got winning the East? Are you the same as me, or do you have a little are you going to be a trailblazer and pick someone different?
No, Georgia's the king of the East. I mean, I think they're on a hill so much higher than Tennessee, than Florida, than South Carolina. I feel like you've got Tennessee, you've got Georgia at the top of the hill, and Tennessee's kind of climbing. They're just trying to make their way up the hill, but I feel like there's so many, like the rest of the teams in the East are, I mean, they're just fighting, tooth and nail to just to make one step in the right direction, just to get like going up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And Hampton, you're right. Tennessee is losing a lot of production on that offensive side of the ball. I mean, they're losing Jalen Hyatt, the Tillman receiver, who's quote unquote their best receiver when he wasn't hurt. Hendon Hooker, Darnell Wright. I mean, all these guys that are going to be big holes to fill. And we've seen a lot of Joe Milton and his cannon of an arm, but I think the thing that Joe Milton can show in camps that does not, like transition to games is he's got an arm that can throw it 80 yards, 100 yards. He can throw it a long, long way. But he's going to be able to fit in these tight windows at 10 yards, at 15 yards, at 30 yards, where you've got him, you've got your guy and another guy yard apart. Is he going to be able to make those tight window throws, which Hendon Hooker did a great job of doing last year. I think Georgia is the king of the East still. Some question marks at quarterback with Carson Beck being named their starter, but I believe I'm right that George Pickens, his pro day, that he picked Carson Beck to be his quarterback to throw to him. So there is that.
Really?
At least there's at least that recognition in years past that he was the most talented, the guy with the most arm talent at Georgia. Will he be able to replicate what Stetson Bennett did? No. But I don't think he has to. Georgia's got enough pieces. They've got enough talent, especially the way they played at TCU last year. They don't really have to be all they were last year. So I think that it's Georgia in the East. They're Tennessee might make a run at it, but I don't see them eclipsing Georgia this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a very interesting matchup in the East. The second to last weekend, Tennessee hosts Georgia, and that's going to be, I think if last year Tennessee had hosted Georgia, they probably beat them, just to be honest. Even with the game plan that Georgia employed on them, I think with that environment, I think Tennessee gives them a much better game and maybe even beats them. But I just want to make one quick point on Milton. We sometimes evaluate quarterbacks by their highlight plays. So him and Anthony Richardson are two prime examples. You go on YouTube, you Google them, you're wowed at the highlight plays. But you don't evaluate a quarterback on their highlight plays. You evaluate the quarterback on the misses. You evaluate them on the down in, and down out basis. And that is where Joe Milton struggles. You can have one good throw, but if the rest of the time, if it's a 10 passes, you have one good throw out of that, and the rest of the 9 are all over the place, so you're not going to be a very effective quarterback. And I think that is kind of what sums him up really well. And I compare him very favorably to Anthony Richardson. He's not near the athlete, but just from an arm perspective and from the fact of I'm going to make a highlight play, and that's what people are going to talk about, but we're not going to talk about all the rest in the game that he's not getting right.
I think that I honestly had that comp in my head of just freak of an athlete. Can they dial it in? I mean, it's the question that Anthony Richardson, he gets to answer as an NFL. I mean, apparently he's gotten him this far. So, yeah, we'll see. Like you said, a lot of talent, inconsistent, but has the talent to be an unreal quarterback. So, I like how you put that. Thought it was a great comp. Hey, let's move right into the hardest division in college football. So, fellas, I think we can have a pretty good discussion because this one is a little bit more of a mixed bag per se. So, Graham, let's start with you. Who do you think wins the East?
I got Georgia winning the East. In the West,
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you were sticking to your answer.
Yeah. In the West, as much as it pains me to say, LSU. I think LSU last year exceeded expectations. I mean, the expectation was for them to 6-7 wins, for Brian Kelly to come into LSU, to start building his recruiting base in the South and to develop. It could be a fluke. They could not be good this year. But I think with Jaden Daniels, he was a fantastic runner of the football. I think that he's got to make strides in the passing game in order for LSU to maybe take that next step. Because when you look at their defense, what they were opportunistic. Whenever it was big play time, they were able to do it. They were able to, on offense, they were able to make we've got to have the third down conversion. They were able to do it. I think I'm going with LSU. I want to be a homer and say Alabama, but the quarterback room is just too big of a question mark. You cannot trust anything that is going on being said anywhere around that room because as you hear one thing, you hear another. I mean, you hear that Milroe is going to be the guy. He had an awful game. You hear Ty Simpson's going to be the best thrower of the football since Tua Tagovailoa. Oh, Tyler Buckner's going to be number 2 with Milroe. I think that just what you're hearing out of Alabama's quarterback room, it could be a very much of a misdirection of, hey, let's just point them in all kind of ways and maybe no one ever gets a hold of things. But unfortunately, I think that there actually is concern in the quarterback room. I think that nobody's won the job, which is not overly concerning. But when you look at the talent there, it's not like it's Jalen Hurts or Bryce Young, or it's Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, or Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa. It's Jalen Milroe and it's Ty Simpson and a guy that lost to Marshall last year. That's just such a big concern. I think Alabama made good additions by hiring Tommy Rees and what's the defense coordinator's name?
Kevin Steele.
I think those are both good additions. Are they able to step in year one and make the difference? I don't know. I want Alabama to win it, but I think that LSU just has the pieces and it's theirs to lose. And it's been a division SC West has where it's been Alabama's to lose. I think LSU has kind of taken over the SEC West, at least this past year, with a quarterback like Bryce Young and Alabama still not be able to get over the hump. That was concerning for me, especially now that the quarterback room is not Bryce Young. So I am saying all of this to just eat at Hampton's heart and to just stir the bowl of Hampton, so that now he can now give me the reason why Alabama will never lose a game ever again. Why Kevin Steele will call every defensive call perfect. Nick Saban will have to raise his voice one time this year. So Hampton, go ahead and tell me why Alabama's going to go undefeated and not give up a point and win each game about 100-0.
Well, I didn't know there was a bowl of Hampton to stir, but we'll address your LSU point first because you probably think I'm going to come out and attack you and be like, Graham, you're an idiot. Yeah. I don't think you're crazy for thinking that LSU is going to win the division. They had a good year last year. They won it last year. And what probably Brian Kelly would say and many analysts would say, they're ahead of schedule. Would anyone agree with that?
Yeah,
okay. Chase says no.
Continue.
Here's my thing with LSU that I don't think is getting talked about enough. And Josh Pate, friend of the show, and who I very much respect in the media business, he's even talked about this with LSU, and I agree with it. Yes, they beat Alabama last year. And I know to your point, Graham, you mentioned if Alabama couldn't beat them with Bryce Young. Well, what people failed to remember
is it Bryce Alabama Young first overall?
That, but he was also playing with a hurt shoulder. He was not healthy in that game. If you go back, that game and the Iron Bowl in 2021 are probably two of the worst games Bryce Young has ever played. And in 2022 against LSU, which we did a full deep dive on, I talked about what LSU did to combat him as far as spying Perkins, blitzing the interior, which he struggled with during his time at Alabama. But his shoulder was also really, really hurt. He didn't practice any before that game, and it affected the level of play.
It showed.
It showed. But what I'm saying is when we don't put that context in there, it's just like, oh, Bryce Young was firing at 100 and LSU just beat him. And that's not what happened. And you look at that game, that was the worst Alabama played all year. Would we all agree with that? Other than maybe Texas. That and Texas were probably the worst that Alabama played all year long. And it took overtime for LSU to beat Alabama. And you take that game out, and we're not taking that game out because it was important. But look what happened in some other matchups for LSU last year. Tennessee goes down there. Blitzkrieg. They blew them out. Okay? Texas A&M goes down there. A 5-7 team, but at the time they went and played them, they were 4-7. They put up 38 points on them. 38 points on, and they had not scored that against Appalachian State, and they scored 38 on LSU in that final game of the year. Then you go to the Georgia game. Georgia blows them out. So what I'm saying is they were a very high variance team where you have 3 games where they got blown out, and then another game that I didn't even mention, after they beat Alabama, they play Arkansas. Okay? Arkansas almost beats them with a backup quarterback. If KJ Jefferson plays that game, more than likely they win. So what I'm saying is I'm very high on LSU. I think they got a lot of talent. Jayden Daniels, like you mentioned, I think will take another step. But would any of us say that he is a prolific passer by any stretch of the imagination? To me, his biggest threat is his rushing ability, which when he played Alabama, Pete Golding, God love him, didn't spy him. And part of that had to do with Deontay Lawson being hurt that game, who would have been an effective spy on Jayden Daniels and limited his rushing opportunity. But I like Jayden Daniels. I like Malik Neighbors, Kyron Lacey, Brian Thomas, the Alabama transfer Aaron Anderson at receiver. I mean, they've got a good receiver core. I like the running backs with Noah Cain, John Emery. Defensively, you've got Perkins, who's your breakout player of the year. You've got Mason Smith, who's coming back from injury, who I'm very high on. But there's also a question with their secondary. You feel good probably about your starters, but if you get to nickel and dime situations, I don't think they have a lot of depth there. They lost a lot in the back end, and I want to say, and I'm going to pull up my stats real quick that I looked pre-show, they lost 7 of their top 11 tacklers from last year. That's pretty significant. Even if you're bringing in transfers who have experience, they still haven't played as a unit. So for all those reasons, I do think LSU is going to be a very good team this year. But I don't have them winning the West because I think if you look closer into last year, it's not all sunshines and rainbows. If they hadn't have beat Alabama, you know what I'll equate it to? That's what I'll equate it to. It is very similar, even though what Brian Kelly and the LSU team did was way more impressive than this. It's no different than what Texas A&M was in 2021. You take away them beating Alabama, I mean, you can't take it away, but what I'm saying is if you prognosticate what they were in 2022, and I'm not saying LSU is going to be 5-7 by any means, I'm just saying that little parallel I think is pretty interesting. Now, to the team that I think is going to win the SEC West, and yes, I'm being a little bit of a homer, but I do really believe in this Alabama team. And let me paint a little picture like our good friend Bob Ross. Make a little happy accident. This team is 2015 Alabama. Okay? Go with me here for a minute. 2013, 2021, what happened? Teams with high expectations that were really close to winning championships, but ultimately failed. 2014 to 2022, same type thing. You went a little farther in 2014 due to a great coaching job by Lane Kiffin, making Blake Sims into the SEC Offensive Player of the Year and Amari Cooper into a Heisman contender. But you go back and look at that team, they had a near loss to Arkansas on the road. There were a couple other games that were way too close. And to me, that was due to a little bit of dip in recruiting, which I think we talked about on the show. After Alabama lost to Tennessee, that while the recruiting rankings have been good, if you go back and look at some of the classes, specifically 2019 and 2020, there were some misavows that really, really hurt this team at receiver, at defensive line, and at O-line. And the offensive line and defensive line have really reared their ugly head, especially the offensive line in 2021. And last year, while improved, they were not a good run blocking unit. They significantly improved as a pass blocking unit, going from like 40 sacks given up in 21 to only 10 last year, something around that number. So market improvement, but you saw that in 13 and 14, a little bit of a talent dip. Alabama was still good, but they weren't the Bama standard. 2021, 2022, same type thing. You had a couple guys that were playing, not being ugly to Chris Owens, God bless him, God love him. He had no business playing at Alabama as right tackle when he was a turnstile getting beat play after play. Okay? There were a couple other guys on that defense that would not have started Alabama in 2000 from 2009 to 2012, if we're just being honest. Okay? So I compare 13, 14, 21, 22. You go in and you look at 2015. 2015, that Alabama team, what were they centered around? Do y'all remember?
Run the football.
Run the football with Derrick Henry. They ran the football with Derrick Henry. The offensive line was not a great pass blocking unit, but they were effective in run blocking. And they were committed and emphasized the run week in and week out. What's Alabama going to do this year? They got a stout offensive line that I'm really, really high on. That, as currently constructed, we have Caden Proctor at left tackle, who's a mammoth of a man. Tyler Booker, who is going to be an All-American by the end of the year. Seth McLaughlin, very good center in the SEC. Not going to go All-American status, but very good player. Darian Dalcourt at right guard, who has 3 years of experience starting in the SEC. Not sure if he's going to keep that job the whole year, which I think bodes well for Alabama down the stretch, because I think a guy like Terrence Ferguson, who has had a really good fall camp, could usurp him at some point once they can move Booker back to right guard and put Ferguson at left guard after Caden Proctor feels more comfortable making the calls and making the line checks at the left tackle position. And then you got Latham, who probably is going to be a first-round pick in the next draft at right tackle. So that's going to be the identity of the team. And bringing in a guy like Tommy Rees, you mentioned it, Graham, him coming in from Notre Dame, I think is a huge upgrade because Bill O'Brien, while a lot of Alabama fans hated his guts, hated them, I didn't think he was awful, but I don't think he was the best fit for the college game. Tommy Rees is a good fit for the college game. and he's going to be committed to running the ball and scheming up easy plays for his quarterback to get them in a rhythm with them being first-time starters and to get easy yards. I mean, Alabama went 3 and out way too often last year and the year before because I told a buddy of mine, and this is kind of true, Bill O'Brien was kind of like Jimbo Fisher. You think about it. He required perfect execution by his quarterback. He put a lot on his quarterback to make reads, and he didn't give them easy plays, easy yards to kind of get the offense going. And I think Tommy Rees is going to be much more equipped to do that. And he's really good with the run game, with the different formations and plays that he designs. And I think he's going to utilize the tight ends. Amari Niblack, who I wanted to mention as a breakout player this year, have heard fantastic things about him this fall. I think he's going to be a really, really good player and be good for whoever the quarterback is. And I'm going to get a quarterback. We're going to save that for last. Switching over to defense, can we all say that Kevin Steele is an upgrade from Pete Golding? Can I get an amen from the church congregation?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if I really get excited.
Okay.
I mean, I don't love Pete, but Kevin Steele, I'm like, hey, show me what you got. Upgrade, maybe. We'll see. I don't know, Graham, how do you feel about that? I might have not given the best reaction for, like, what's the consensus reaction of the Kevin Steele hire, just quickly? Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little bit higher on the hire than you guys are because I thought he did a fantastic job at Auburn when he was at Auburn. And I said that while he was there, not just after the fact. He held that Joe Burrow LSU team to 23 points, their lowest output of the year in 2019, which I think was very impressive. Now, they gained a lot of yards and there were a lot of penalties in that game, but he still held them to 23 points. I mean, points are what matters. Points are what win the game, not yards. And with Pete, the stats were all right with Alabama's defense. In a lot of categories, they were better than Georgia. The difference is with red zone defense and high leverage situations, Alabama's defense did not step up to the challenge. And I think a lot of that had to do with Pete Golding's defense being a little too complex, him not being the best teacher, and him not instilling a old school kind of mentality that I think they were lacking. And Kevin Steele was going to bring that back. There's going to be a renewed emphasis on the fundamentals, on discipline, about doing your job well. And I think he simplified things to allow the defenders to play faster and not be thinking so much, which I know sounds dumb, but sometimes you got to just read and react and not, try to solve a calculus problem, as my friend Thomas the Wizard Watts says, and just go play football. You don't want to ever get too simplistic where you're easy to figure out, but I think Kevin Steele is a major upgrade over Pete Golding. I feel really good about the defensive line, much better than last year. I think Jaheim Otis is going to be a star in this league. He was really, really good a year ago. I think he's going to take another step. They got to work on the depth a little bit. I will fully acknowledge that. But I think as the year goes on, it will get better as some young guys get more reps and get more playing time. Linebackers, I think they're going to be arguably the best that we've had in 4 or 5 years. I feel whatever you want to say about Pete Golding as a defensive coordinator, and I don't think he was awful. I thought he was a solid defensive coordinator, not to the standard that we're accustomed to. I thought he was a terrible inside linebacker coach. He was not a good inside linebacker coach. He did not develop his guys very well. The only guy that developed all right was Christian Harris. And I think a lot of that just had to do from him playing more and more, and he did not play linebacker in high school. He played cornerback. So I felt good about Deontay Lawson, Jahad Campbell, Dresden Marshall battling at the At the wheel position, I think they're going to be good. There's going to be a lot of athletic upside. But most importantly, I feel great about the secondary, man.
Mm-hmm.
This secondary is full of blue chip prospects, and not only that, but versatility. I mean, they can play in nickel, dime. They can mix and match to get the best 6 guys on the field. And Kool-Aid's locked down. I'm expecting a huge year from Terrion Arnold. The 2 transfers, Jalen Key and Trey Amos, are going to contribute in a big way. Jalen Key is going to start alongside Caleb Downs at safety. I mean, I think he's going to be a really good player. You got guys, and that's not even mentioning guys like Devontae Smith, Earl Little, who all can contribute. Malachi Moore, who's been a 4-year starter. So I love all the pieces. Like you said, Graham, the big question is quarterback. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you Alabama's going to win a national championship this year because I don't know. And if I had to say right now, I would say probably not because quarterback is a question mark. But am I worried that we're going to have below average quarterback play? No, I'm not. Because there has not been a year under Nick Saban where we've had below average quarterback play. I mean, just to be honest, even in 2015, Jake Coker, he was average for most of the year. He was a tough guy. He was a good leader. But what happened? Toward the end of the year, when they needed him, he stepped up and made plays. And so whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Jalen Milroe, whether it's Ty Simpson, whether it's Tyler Buckner, or whether it's Dylan Lonergan, the freshman, who has generated a lot of buzz in fall camp, I think one of the 4 will step up, secure the job. It may look bumpy early, but by the end of the year, I think Alabama's going to be a well-oiled machine. Early, they're going to lean on that running back room that features Jason McClellan, Roydell Williams, Jam Miller, who is going to break out this year. He was another player I wanted to put as a breakout player. And Justice Haynes, the freshman, who's going to make noise too. They're going to lean on them and lean on that defense. And I really am high on all the parts on the team, but quarterback and the receiver room are going to dictate the ceiling. But I think in the end, they're going to figure it out. What are your thoughts on all that, gentlemen? I know I went on for a while, but there was a lot to cover, a lot to break down. But I'd love to hear your feedback or your kind of pushback if you don't believe in some of the stuff I said.
If you're on Alabama's roster and didn't get a shout out during that monologue, then you should be highly offended. Many of you were talked about, but
sorry, Miles Kitselman.
Graham, I think that you summed up something really well last year, and I think it came down to 2 things. It was it really felt like Alabama just did not get turnovers on defense, and you can call some of that a little lucky. Like there's some of that like they've got to throw a ball that can be intercepted, and a lot of teams had the best game of the season against us, and we had penalties. But I think even our special teams last year really needed some work, and I think that there's some of this we could really get in the weeds on. And I think that there is some things in the weeds that we need to look at, evaluate, give credit to. There's other things that are in the weeds that I'm like, I don't know how much of a factor they'll play. And so I think when I think through this, I think that what you mentioned is spot on. I think that there's going to be almost like a culture shift with coaching, which I think is a good move. Graham, I think you said that well, maybe a step back. And not that's a negative step back, but hey, we've got to establish the fundamentals of what it looks like to develop players, to hone in a culture that not only wants to win, but like enjoys the physical side of football. And there was teams when we played high school football that I remember our coach would say, hey, this team just loves playing defense. Like they love hitting somebody. And I think that we need to get a little bit of that ethos back in the locker room. So I can agree with some of that there. And Hampton, I think you did a really good job of giving credit where credit was due. I think where I'm just hesitant, and I don't know if it feels right to say that LSU's going to win win the division, because it feels weird to say that Alabama's going to win the division and then not win the national championship. We've seen it happen before, but I just truly, when I look at the quarterback room, I know there's a huge question mark, And I think I'd be okay with that if it felt like there was a consistent, both of these guys are good and they are battling. What it feels like is Bryce Young last year, who was injured, was better, miles ahead better than any other option that we had. And he was first overall pick. Like it's credit to Bryce, but then also a little bit of, hey, his backup couldn't have picked up a little bit of ground if we would have put them in. We saw that in the A&M game. That game shouldn't have probably been close, and we had really poor quarterback play. And what I'm hearing this year is that he's our guy. I'm hoping that he's been developed. I hope that the offense has been formed around him. It scares me that the thought might be that he starts the year and then Simpson takes over later. I don't know if I love that. I feel like when you do that, you kind of shift the locker room a little bit. You're moving pieces that I don't need to be moved. But I would say that my biggest hesitation is inconsistency with quarterback, but that there's been inconsistency at the wide receiver position, which is just going to make this team very one-dimensional. Because if I'm LSU, what I'm doing is I'm stacking the box and I'm making whoever they're going to allow to play quarterback that day, I'm making them beat me in the air. Yep. And I just don't know how that's going to turn out. So not that I'm going to abstain from voting, but you know, I think that you're right. You had a good pulse on him. When Alabama feels counted out in years like this, Saban plays right into it. He loves this. I mean, it's bulletin board material that he plays into. So I'll pick Alabama to win the division, but I think that it's going to be clunky. It's not going to be polished. There's going to be games that we look really good, and there's going to be games where just simply balls are overthrown, underthrown, drop balls, and we're going to squeak out a win because we got an interception and returned it for a touchdown. Like, that's got to be the season that we're going to have this year. And my hope would be that with some of that culture shift, when we're playing the LSUs and the A&Ms, it's simply they want what we have and that what we feel is ours. Let's go get them, boys. So
let me get one final word in, and then we'll put a bow on it, as Chase likes to say.
Beautiful.
Chase, I agree with your point. It's not going to be pretty at times. I guarantee you probably the first game is not going to be pretty. But go back and look at the comp I made. 2015 Alabama. 2015 Alabama, go back and rewatch some of those games. They are not aesthetically pleasing. I mean, Jay Coker was not dynamite for most of the year. I mean, there were a lot. I mean, dude, we didn't connect on a deep ball until game 5 against Georgia when he threw it to Calvin Ridley in the rain. And while I understand, Graham, your point of I feel like the quarterback is going to be an anchor. I don't think it's going to be an anchor. I just think it's going to be a little inconsistent. But we've won with inconsistent quarterback play in the past because the pieces around the quarterback are so great. Now, I get your point about the receiver room as well. Totally get it. The drops are frustrating. I do feel like they've been a little bit overblown by some of the people who attended the scrimmage and were like, oh, we're dropping everything. We can't catch a cold. I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's one guy. I think it's like one guy has a drop here, one guy has a drop there. And I'm high on the talent in this room. I like Jermaine Burton. I think he's going to have a really good year. He's had a really good fall camp. Bond, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, those 3 guys that were freshmen last year, another year, they have a lot of talent, a lot of upside. I think they're going to be able to make some noise. And then you got Benson and Brooks, who Benson has been coming along strong. A lot of talent. He's a speed guy. And Brooks is a consistent performer in the SEC. Is he a fantastic receiver? No, he's not. He's a very good receiver, though. Very good SEC receiver. And I just think ultimately, when the pieces around everything are so good, I have to believe that they get it figured out. And I know that's a leap of faith for sure, but I also don't think, with the competition at quarterback, it's just been who's been, like a battle of mid. I don't think that. I think it's been inconsistent for sure, but I think all 4 quarterbacks have done good things. I think they've all shown improvement. And I think ultimately when someone is named the guy And Tommy Rees crafts a game plan around him, and he's not going to be the main focal point. For the past 5 or 6 years, the quarterback has been the playmaker of the offense. That will not be this year. It will be either 2015 Jake Coker or 2016 Jalen Hurts. And what did that team do? They ran the football, they ran it with the quarterback, and they relied on that outstanding defense. And I think that is the recipe to Alabama winning the SEC West this year. But, boys, I cannot wait to see how it plays out because Alabama doesn't have long to figure it out. Week 2 versus Texas, we will know and find out a ton about this football team.
Hey, got one more question, and this is just a yes or no. 10 days out, the fall camp is over. Practice has begun. I'm not saying do you know, but do you feel like they have named a starter inside the program that they are crafting that game plan around?
Yes. For game 1?
Yep.
For game 1, it will be Jalen Milroe.
Kirby, you think it's true? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the powerhouse. Well, hey, fellas, enjoyed this a ton. Hey, if you're checking us out for the first time or maybe you're back, for us, man, I can't even remember when we started this, but it's been years to this point, which has been really fun and a great way for us to keep up 4 years running. Hey, if you're not liked or you haven't liked the video, please do that. But subscribe to us. We want to be on your feed as you're driving in the car, as you're getting in the shower, trying to just catch up on what the weekend will I guess hold for all the SEC and college football that's going to happen that Saturday. So if you'll subscribe to the channel, but then also like the video, share it with a friend, that would be awesome. So we appreciate you guys, and we will see you when we see you, because I don't know if we've nailed down when the next time will be. So maybe a few pickups coming up will probably what that'll look like. So, fellas, anything else y'all want to say? Or are we good to go?
Hey, it was a joy. It was a pleasure. And the Pigskin Cafe is closed for now. But until next time, chew on that.